The small Texas school that I went to had a tradition carried out every year during the 8th grade graduation. A beautiful gold and green jacket, the school colors, was awarded to the class valedictorian, the student who had maintained the highest grades for 8 years. The scholarship jacket had a big golden S on the left front side and the name of the student written in golden letters on the pocket. S. My eldest sister Rosie had won the jacket a few years back, and I fully expected to also. I was 14 and in the 8th grade. I had been a straight A student since the 1st grade, and last year I had looked forward very much to owning that jacket. My father was a farm laborer who couldn't earn enough money to feed 8 children, so when I was 6, I was given to my grandparents to raise. We couldn't participate in sports at school because there were registration fees, uniform costs, and trips out of town. So even though our family was quite agile and athletic, there would never be a school sports jacket for us. This one, the scholarship jacket, was our only chance. In May, close to graduation, spring fever had struck as usual with a vengeance. No one paid any attention in class. Instead, we stared out of the window and at each other, as if wanting to speed up the last few weeks of school. I despaired every time I looked in the mirror. Pencil thin, not a curve anywhere. I was called a beanpole and a string bean, and I knew that's what I looked like. I only had a brain. That's what I had. That really wasn't much for a 14-year-old to work with, I thought, as I absent-mindedly wandered from my history class to the gym. Another hour of sweating in basketball and displaying my toothpick legs was coming up. Then I remembered my physical education shorts were still in the bag under my desk, where I'd forgotten them. I had to walk all the way back and get them. Coach Thompson was a real bear if someone wasn't dressed for class. She had said I was a good forward and even tried to talk Grandma into letting me join the team once. Of course, Grandma said no. I was almost back at my classroom door when I heard voices raised in anger. As if in some sort of argument, I stopped. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I just hesitated, not knowing what to do. I needed those shorts, or I was going to be late. But I didn't want to interrupt an argument between my teachers. I recognized the voices. Mr. Schmidt, my history teacher, and Mr. Boone, my maths teacher. They seemed to be arguing about me. I couldn't believe it. I still remember the feeling of shock that rooted me flat against the wall as if I was trying to blend in with the graffiti written there. That was Mr. Schmidt, and he sounded very angry. Mr. Boone's voice sounded calm and quiet. The pounding in my ears drowned out the rest of the words. Only a word here and there filtered through. Martha is Mexican. Resign. Won't do it. Mr. Schmidt came rushing out, and luckily for me, he went down the opposite way towards the auditorium, so he didn't see me. Shaking, I waited a few minutes and then went in and grabbed my bag and fled from the room. Mr. Boone looked up when I came in but didn't say anything. To this day, I don't remember if I got in trouble in physical education for being late or how I made it through the rest of the afternoon. I went home very sad and cried into my pillow that night so that grandmother wouldn't hear me. It seemed a cruel coincidence that I had overheard that conversation. The next day when the principal called me into his office, I knew what it would be about. He looked uncomfortable and uneasy. I decided I wasn't going to make it any easier for him. So I looked him straight in the eyes. He looked away and fidgeted with the papers on his desk. He said, he cleared his throat and continued. I stared at him in shock, and a small sound of dismay escaped my throat. I hadn't expected this. He still avoided looking in my eyes. I didn't need to ask who that was. Standing with all the dignity I could muster, I said, I cried on the walk home from the bus stop. The road was a quarter-mile from the highway, so by the time I got home, my eyes were red and puffy. Where's Grandpa? I asked Grandma, looking down at the floor, so she wouldn't ask me why I'd been crying. She was sewing a quilt as usual and didn't look up. I think he's out back, working in the bean field. I went outside and looked out at the fields. There he was. I could see him walking between the rows, his body bent over the little plants, hoe in hand. I walked slowly to him, trying to think how I could best ask him for the money. There was a cool breeze